Good morning. 1 Peter 1 13 through 21. Therefore, preparing your minds for action and being sober-minded, set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance, but as he who called you is holy, you also be holy in all your conduct, since it is written, "You shall be holy, for I am holy." And if you call on him as Father, who judges impartially according to each one's deeds, conduct yourselves with fear throughout the time of your exile, knowing that you were ransomed from the futile ways inherited from your forefathers, not with perishable things such as silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of a lamb without blemish or spot. He was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but was made manifest in the last times for the sake of you, who through him are believers in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are in God.
All right. Well, good morning. Thank you to all those who, did the whole Narnia thing here this past week, really for, the past couple months, feels like. I got to come Thursday night, and I'm sure, like me, if you were here, man, you were quite surprised at, just the talents and giftedness of the people here. And everything from those who imagined it and were able to arrange and direct the whole thing, to those who were writing the music and building the sets and putting the costumes together, and to those who were acting. Man, I was blown away at the acting skills that some of our people have, and I was scared by some of them too. My goodness. So it's really cool to watch, but I will say too, just even as a pastor, the even cooler part was to see, just the church family coming and doing it together, young and old, and building relationships and getting to know one another, and doing this, just as a way to be a blessing to our neighborhood and the community that we're part of, or a church family and friends and family, all of that. Just to see everybody doing that together and having a great time doing it and doing it excellently, it was cool, and that's what really church is. In big picture, what church is supposed to be all about. You're going to hear probably Pastor Mark come up at the end and promo the missions month that's coming up, which is all about God's people on mission together. And the Narnia crew, you kind of modeled that for us already in the front end. So, so thank you for that. Continue to pray for those people. I was known as affectionately as the dream crusher around here. I was the one that when it was first posed, hey, why don't we do a Narnia production? I was like, because I knew the amount of work that was going to go into it. I knew how busy and stressed out everybody was going to be. I'm like, are we sure that we want to tackle that? All that to say, I'm still praying for you as you come down off of that and go back to work and try to catch up on all the things you've neglected over the past month. So please continue to pray for them, and even as there's more work to clean up and tear down some things like that. So thank you. It was, wonderful and neat to watch. Just a reminder, tonight, since it's our third Sunday, we'll have our second installment of the Kingdom Conversations here, just kind of continuing the theme of kingdom that we were exploring, especially in the season of Epiphany, and then just relating that, or using that as a launching pad for conversations on just some of the things that we see in broader kingdoms of the world, and how we think about those and talk about those, and just creating a space to do that together. So this morning we are in 1 Peter 1. Lectionary has us continuing. It's still Easter, right? Easter, not just one day in the church calendar, but a full season. And so in our lectionary, we have us still in 1 Peter 1, all rooted in this, what has happened as a result of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead, the implications of that. And as I was thinking about this week, I don't know if it's because it's that time of year or because I have a daughter who's graduating this year, but I was just thinking about graduation. A couple of you here are getting ready to graduate in a couple weeks. If you think about that day, it's a pretty significant day, even though, the rest of, I think most of our graduates here are going back on to pick up school again in the fall. But, in theory, that's a pretty significant day. There, fundamentally, so much changes in the life of an individual when you walk across that stage and you're handed your diploma, right? Up until this point, 12 years of your life were, dictated by class schedules, bells, late-night homework assignments, whatever agenda the Pennsylvania Department of Education set for you and the goals that they had for you, that was, the dictate of your life. So now, as you have that diploma, that's no longer, your life. You don't ever have to darken the doors of a classroom again. You don't ever have to wake up early if you don't want to for an 8 o'clock class anymore. You don't have to spend hours into the evening or night researching and preparing papers or assignments, on things that couldn't interest you in the least. And, there's a whole world of opportunity that's open to you now. You can go back to more school if you want. You can enter the workforce. You could take, one of them gap years, live on the cheap and go travel the world and build relationships, right? You can do whatever you want. It's really such a momentous shift there. And for whatever reason, it's just the picture I had in mind, when I think of Peter, who, our passage this morning, it continues off of last week, which started off with, remember, you have been born anew into this whole new mode of existence on account of the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. You have been born into this living hope. Right now, your whole mode of life is bathed in actual hope. Right? Because when Jesus comes walking out of the tomb, it's not just him bringing his own life out of the tomb, but it's literally bringing, biblically speaking, a whole creation with him. And he's launching this restoration operation of God restoring all that's not right and now leading his creation on this trajectory of newness. The biblical writers, now, we're aiming towards this day when on the earth, every tear will be wiped away from every eye. People from every tongue, tribe, and nation will gather together and sing the same song of praise and celebration. Justice will roll down like mighty waters and righteousness like ever-flowing streams. All peoples will enjoy the abundance and the goodness of God's creation and will be led together and kept secure together by a good, wise, and gracious king. Right? This glorious hope. All that has begun to be unleashed on account of the resurrection of Jesus. So for Peter, if you've hitched your life to this Jesus, do you understand? Nothing is the same. Because now your life is flooded with this hope. Now you are born into this new family with this glorious inheritance. And basically where he's going today is saying, so if that's the case, and if you own that, your life should reflect that in a way that makes it look different. Right? In the same way you would think it odd for somebody to choose to wake up super early if they didn't have to anymore. Well, because that's just what I always did. I got up and I went, or even worse, stay up late at night and let me just do some sentence diagramming because that's just what I did in English class for all those years. Or let me research Latin American history because, well, that's what I did all last year. And I guess there would be a strangeness to that, right? There's a newness. And for Peter, last week was all talking about fleshing out what this hope looks like and how it's kept secure. Today it's, if you've hitched your life to this, it should affect the way your life looks. And we're just going to look at 3 ways in the passage that he talks about, or he describes the way that difference. We'll look at one little danger of the old life that he's sort of implicitly warning against. And then we'll also see one just real, or we'll kind of land on one real practical thing that he offers for us. So, okay, first, let me start with this warning. And where it comes up is when you heard it said, you were ransomed. Did you pick that up in the line? I forget what verse it is, but it says, you were ransomed by the precious blood of Christ. It was like a lamb without spot or blemish. Okay, and so that word there, ransomed, if you ever watch an old movie where someone is taken hostage, right, and the captives send a ransom note out and say, well, you pay this amount of money or you do this or whatever, and we will let this captive person go free. Biblically speaking, there's something that's kind of close to what this word for ransom actually means. It's this idea that of being liberated from some kind of captive or oppressor or tyrant. The classic example would have been like in the Old Testament when God ransoms and redeems his people from Egypt. Like he's literally liberating them from the Egyptian empire to whom they were slaves and captives. That's the picture of this word ransom. I think like liberating. And if you think about that, well, at least back in the very beginning, it was in part sold to us that part of the reason for going into Iran, at least in part, was to liberate a people who seemingly were wanting to be liberated from this oppressive regime that they were under. I don't know if that's still the agenda or the goal. It seems like we've drifted, whatever. But early on, that was at least what was sold to us. In part, we're liberating. So like you think of that idea of liberating, like it's liberating from out of oppression so that they can, be truly fully human and like live life as they were intended to and as God would desire. So it's a liberation from all that would rage against their life. Do you see it? So the question is, for Peter, what are we being liberated from, or what are we being ransomed from? And you pick it here, I mentioned two things that are bold. Don't be conformed to the passions of your former ignorance. And then at the end, you were ransomed from the futile ways inherited from your forefathers. These are the two things, right? The passions of your former ignorance and futile ways. He's not being belittling here. He's just simply saying, like, there is a way of doing life that is ignorant or uninformed of who God is and what his desires as creator is for your life and the purpose of it. There's a way of doing life that is ignorant of all that, and as a result is futile and empty and doesn't aim at what you were created for. So throughout the book, he warns them, like, watch out for those passions. Actually, in chapter 2, like he says it this way, I urge you as sojourners and exiles, abstain from the passions of your flesh. Pick it up, which wage war against your soul. Or for Peter, that's code for which wage war for your very life. You can think of like in the Old Testament, think when God liberated the Israelites from Egypt, and then they come into the wilderness, and maybe some of those, bodily desires and passions kick up, right? They get hungry, they get thirsty, they get tired or hot as they're venturing through the wilderness en route to the land of promise. And what do those passions start to make them crave? Like they actually want to go back and say, oh, that we were back in Egypt, back under oppression, because there at least we had water and food and some sort of relative comfort. Like, forget where we're going. So watch out for that, he says. And again, watch out for these futile ways. Now, in our men's group yesterday, where's Norm? Norm kept talking about there is a way, right, that Jesus models, and there is a way that he calls us to as a people. And the thing is, outside of life with Christ, there are also ways that we go about life in the world that we are part of. And right, if it's out of a certain ignorance of who God is, what he's created us for, there's an emptiness to that. I feel like I'm doing a lot of name dropping here today. Chris Kessler, where is he? Chris Kessler sent me a podcast this week. I forget who the interviewer was. But he was interviewing Arthur Brooks, there he is. Hey, he was interviewing Arthur Brooks, who's a behavioral scientist at Harvard. And Arthur Brooks was telling about how there was a 10-year gap where he stepped out of academic world. He was in academic world and professor, most of his adult life. He stepped out of that in 2008 for 10 years to go work at a think tank in Washington, D.C., and then 2018, he goes back into academia, and he notices, there's been some massive changes in the disposition and the joy and the happiness of these campus students. He said when he left in 2008, it was generally the case that campus students were generally more happy, more full of joy and excitement than people who weren't on campus. By 2018, everything had flipped. And he said the depression rates had tripled, anxiety was through the roof, loneliness, identity politics, like all this stuff was going on the campuses. And, and so they were just talking about this epidemic of unhappiness. He writes a lot about the business of happiness, that especially is infecting the younger generations. And he was talking about in particular that what is missing and what is causing so much unhappiness is this macro ingredient of meaning in life. And they started talking about how, the modern world and the way we go at life in the modern world is so inhospitable to meaning. Whether it's the information that is fed to us and how it directs our minds, or even it's just the way that our minds, especially in the younger generations, are in a sense being rewired and being reprogrammed in the technological age to think and act in such a way where there's this whole other, this is where I'm talking way out of my league, but there's this whole other hemisphere of the brain that we're not even using anymore. The hemisphere of the brain that was designed to actually to contemplate and to reflect and to discern meaning and purpose in life. Man, in our technological AI-filled world, we don't even engage that anymore. His basic point was, that this way that we are doing life nowadays, it's inhospitable to meaning, and as that macro ingredient of meaning in life is being void, people are more and more suffering with depression, anxiety, loneliness, and the like. But I think that's what Peter is aiming at. Be careful. There is a way of your forefathers. There is a way that would be dictated by passions and desires that is ignorant of what God is doing and what he has made you for, and that would be ultimately empty and futile. Okay, so instead, how does he say this is how you should be living your life now in this newness, in this new ransomed life that you have? Well, first of all, he says, conduct yourselves with fear throughout the time of your exile. Again, knowing that you were ransomed from the futile ways inherited from your forefathers and so forth. Not with perishable things, but with the precious blood of Christ. Just real quick, there's that exile phrase there. We saw that last week, and there's a real literal sense where he's writing to people who are in exile. They've had to flee home and land and community because the pressure was intensifying, persecution was getting a little bit more significant because they had chosen to identify with Jesus, so they're going to exile. But if you read through the whole letter, this is how he characterizes, in one sense, just the general life of anybody who has been born into this new hope and has been born into this new family and calls God our Heavenly Father, has this new identity and status. There is a way now where you are in exile in a world that used to feel like home to you. And again, go back to the graduation theme. Some of you who are a little closer to high school graduation perhaps than I am, maybe you can remember that tension when you would first go back, maybe for homecoming or for a football game, or when you started to have kids that went to the same school and you would go back for concerts or things. You would go into the halls and be there would be the strangeness, I don't even know how to describe it, this sort of it felt, this was the place that for you was essentially home for how many years? Well, it dictated your life. This is where you were formed. This is where you built relationships. And so to be back in it, there's something very familiar about it, home-ish, but yet you don't quite feel like you belong. This place has seemed to move on without me. You go to the homecoming game, you don't go sit in the student section like you used to anymore. You sit with the other grown-up people. Any of you ever experienced that? I experienced it actually when Megan and I were going and visiting colleges, and we went out to Wheaton outside of Chicago, my alma mater, and thankfully she has chosen a good school. She's going to go there in the fall, so I'm very excited about that. I get to have a whole lot of trips out to the old alma mater, but as I'm walking around out there, there was that strangeness. This place literally was home for me. In these relationships, this was family. And so it felt very familiar. I was taking her around, showing her all the places that I used to get into trouble and have all sorts of fun, whatever. And it was nostalgic. But then there was this odd, almost eeriness of, this place has moved on without me. I don't even know if they know me. Well, they don't know me. They don't know who I am. I don't know half the people here anymore. You feel a little bit like an exile in a place that used to feel home. I think that's the picture throughout his book. Like Peter's saying, okay, if you've been born into this new hope, this new mode of existence, this new family relationship, if you've hitched your life to this Jesus, yeah, you're still in the world, you're still in these relationships, but it's going to feel odd and strange. And he's saying, conduct yourself in that time of exile with fear. Which, if you know how that word plays out in the scripture, it's not like this terror per se, but it's like this respect and this deep awe and reverence. If you call on him as Father, the one who judges what is right and an unright or unrighteous, if you have been brought into this new family where God is now your living Father and he has granted to you this glorious inheritance, if your life now is aiming for this incredible hope of restoration and resurrection life on the earth where every tear is wiped away from every eye, and if all of this life was purchased for you, if you were ransomed for this life with the precious blood of Christ, for Peter, there's a sense like you should hold that life now with reverence, with awe, or with something of a holy and sacred fear. Like, do you see it? Like, it's like if I gave you something or somebody gave you something that was of immeasurable worth, and they sacrificed to great length, they spared no expense, like spent everything to purchase this thing and to grant it to you. Wouldn't you hold that with a certain awe and reverence and respect, even a fear that I would mishandle what has been given to me? I think that's the picture. Conduct yourselves in your time of exile with this reverence and this awe and this sacred fear of what you are involved in and who you're a part of and who you have the privilege now to call as your heavenly Father and the glorious hope and all that is yours on account of the precious blood of Christ. There's 3 imperatives in the passage, by the way. That's how we're treating this. The first one you just saw, conduct yourself. We're actually working backwards through the passage. Sorry if it's messing with anybody's OCD, but that's what we're doing. Conduct yourself with fear in a time of your exile. Here's the next imperative. Be holy in all your conduct. Since it is written, you shall be holy, for I am holy. What does it mean to be holy? Yeah, set apart, I heard. For me, the connotation is, to continue the theme, strangeness. Right? Because holy literally means set apart. It is distinct. It is completely other. It is otherworldly. It is not like everything else. Oh, I'm going to start to sing the old Sesame Street song. One of these things is not like the other. One of these. Never mind. I don't know why my mind goes where it goes. But anyway. But when we talk about God as being holy, we're first and foremost talking about him being as utterly set apart and distinct and other from everything else in creation, right? And we make this terrible misfortunate mistake if we ever reduce God to something that is familiar and common. No, God is transcendent, he's mysterious, he is holy, he is completely other. And so as there is a sense, when he says, be holy as I am holy, it's to say that you should bear some of that strangeness. Your life is going to look different. You're going to have that exile type feel that as folks look at you like there is a strangeness to you, or it should be. There should be something provocative about your life that is different and looks strange and holy. He says, actually, be holy in all your conduct. And then he quotes from Leviticus 19, you shall be holy for I am holy. And if you go back and you read Leviticus 19, right, that's the heading, be holy as I am holy. And then he goes on to play out, this is in the law, of what that means. And he talks about what that looks like in family and relationships, in the workplace and how you do your job, in the neighborhood and the community, and particularly how you look out for and care for the less fortunate, for the poor, for the widows, the orphans, the migrants among you, or how you go about your religious practices and the religious practices that you avoid. Like all of this, all of your life and all of your conduct, you're called to be holy as I am holy. And again, think of it in its context. He has just rescued, liberated, ransomed a people from Egypt. Now they're coming out into their newness of life, and They come to Sinai, and God gives them these instructions, and here it is. You are to be my holy people. In some way, your life is supposed to bear my holiness out now, wherever I plant you. And maybe I just quick ask the question for you Bible, trivia, whatever. Where else do we see that theme of bearing something of the mark and the character of who God is out into the world? I'm not asking the question well. I'm thinking all the way back to the very beginning, on the first page of the book. God creates his men and women. How? Or in his image. Right? There's something to this is what it fundamentally means to be human, is that you bear the image, you bear the character, you bear something of the likeness, a small part of the likeness of your Creator out into the rest of the creation. Right? So again, all that Peter is calling you to here is actually what it genuinely means to be truly human. And he's saying, look, this is your mission now, or this is your purpose, or this is that life that is going to be full of the depth of meaning that you can't even imagine, is that you are called in your time of exile to be something of my holy people, that others can look at, see this strange freedom you have from passions and old inherited ways, find this new confidence in hope or this new joy, and catch, or maybe just a difference in the way that you act and conduct your life, and see just a little bit of the character of the Holy Creator and be drawn to that. It's going to be hard at times because you are going to look strange. And for Peter's people, like you read through the book, it opens them up to all sorts of slander, false accusation, increased persecution, suffering, and hardship. Which is why you get to the third. Oh, well, sorry. Forgot about it. I wanted to reference 1 Peter 2. It's the same thing. I urge you as sojourners and exiles, abstain from the passions of your flesh. Keep your conduct among the Gentiles honorable, so that when they speak against you as evildoers, instead they may see your good deeds and do what? Glorify God on the day of his visitation, or the day of his coming. Right? Your life not only has been set free to be what it was always created to be, but now you have this purpose to be his holy representatives, or as Peter will say later in chapter 2, his royal priesthood that somehow moves the rest of the world to see the glory of God and to actually give him glory and praise for that. I mean, if you stop and think about that, that's a massively high calling in a life that's full of a depth of meaning. Again, it gets hard though, which is why you have, there we go, there it is. The third imperative, last one. You have to set your hope fully on the grace that will be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus, or at the coming again of Jesus. If we had time, I'd love to show you throughout the book of 1 Peter. Peter has all these time references all throughout the book. You actually saw it in our passage today. Like you would hear things like Peter talking about this Jesus who was foreknown way back before the foundation of the world, but then who was made manifest, says Peter, in these last days, or who will come again and will bring with him grace and glory, or when he says, conduct yourselves now in the time of your exile. For Peter, it's super important that you have this big picture timeline in view, and you understand what has happened in the past to secure what is coming in the future and what time you're in the present. Okay, and for Peter, it's so important that you set your mind on that bigger time frame, because here's the thing, if you just get this sort of tunnel vision and all you see is the hardship during this time of exile, and if that's what you're focusing on, that's all you can feel, think about, and see, man, do you understand how it is going to be difficult at best, or a work of labor, to conduct yourselves with fear, or to be holy and choose to stand out in your time of exile? It'd be so much easier just to give in to, some of these passions, or just revert back to old feudal ways. Again, think of the Israelites in the wilderness. They come out in the wilderness, and what happens? Their timeline shrinks. And they get this Radical tunnel vision. They forget the ransom that God had accomplished for them in delivering them from Egypt. They forget where they're going, to this glorious land of promise, flowing with milk and honey. And all they can see before them is the difficulty of the wilderness. And in that, they groan, they complain, they grumble, and they start to say, oh, that we were just back in Egypt already. Or when it's time to go in and take possession, oh, we're too afraid of what, like, they've completely forgotten how God had bared his arm and like done this massive thing to liberate them. They lost the timeline, zoomed in. Right? So Peter, it's the same thing. As you conduct your life in this time of exile, as you aim to be as holy representatives, you've got to have this big picture. You've got to remember all that's been done and all that's yet to come. That's what enables you, or somewhat, at least in a small way, frees you to live the life that you're being called to as just sort of this natural and free expression. That's why the ancient church, ancient people all throughout Scripture was so much more time-oriented, I think, than we are today. That's why the ancient church wanted to track time differently than the Romans around them, while they were waiting on that day that was yet to come. It's why they developed these seasons in the church year of Advent and Christmas and Epiphany and Lent and Easter and Pentecost, right? Because they wanted to just be much more intentional, thank you, about how they track time. Because for them, that was such a spiritual discipline and practice, right down to the very week. We're going to make sure we take one day in 7, and we set that apart as holy. And we use that to remember all that God is, all that he has done, all that is yet to do. And this is what keeps us in the story, keeps us playing our part faithfully. So lastly, I mentioned there's one how-to. And here it is. He says, right, and this, set your hope fully, but right before that, this is how you set your hope. He says, you prepare your minds for action and be sober-minded. Just one very little practical thing here, and I'm zeroing in on that sober-minded invitation, and I'm not thinking of that as somber-minded, but really just sober-minded. I'm contrasting it to the idea of maybe being intoxicated-minded, right? Or you can think of a life, what a life looks like, heavily intoxicated under the influence of this, that, and the other, versus a life that is sober and free and clear. And I think what Peter is getting at is we can settle into this condition in life where it's like the mind becomes intoxicated with all sorts of things. And can't you imagine that in our present world too? Like your mind can become intoxicated with all sorts of stuff. Like your mind can be intoxicated with constant stimulation, constant scrolling through news feeds and chats and conversations and alerts or YouTube videos or little short content and blip that comes up all over the place. Right? And then in that, not only is your mind being flooded with constant information, ever-changing information with different perspectives, whatever it is, but like Arthur Brooks would say, we are literally changing the way our mind works and operates so much that we are in that, and he talks about this especially with young people, we are literally only operating out of one hemisphere of the mind. And this whole other hemisphere, which is meant for reflecting and considering and pondering things like hope or the holiness of God, or the preciousness of his blood, and all of that, we are literally trained to not be able to sit in that and to do that anymore. Ugh. Man, would love to go off there and just, really caution you as parents. Man, be careful how you hand technology to your children, because, man, there's so many resources saying, it's actually rewiring the brain. There's this whole half of the brain that children are growing up not knowing how to use. And spiritually, man, are these birds dropping out of the sky? Where was I? Oh, yeah, parents, watch out, because, it is such a spiritual practice and such a necessary spiritual practice that we have the capacity to set our minds on things. So watch out for that. But, man, you can think of a myriad other ways that our minds become intoxicated. You become intoxicated, your minds are intoxicated with rage bait, right? You have your 24-hour cable news stations on and just humming in the background. And what's the whole agenda there? It's to fill you with things that you should be outraged at, or that you should be fearful about, or things that you should be convinced demand urgent action in the here and now. And there's agendas, there's narratives, there's timelines, all baked into that. And if that's what's intoxicating your mind, man, you'll so easily be drawn out of the timeline and the narrative and the story of what God is doing in his creation and what that calls of us. Or you could be intoxicated with all these voices that tell you who you are. That you are the sum of your passions and your desires and your unique idiosyncrasies. Or you are the sum of how everybody else looks at you and thinks of you. Or you are the sum of what it is you can accomplish in life. And if that's what's intoxicating your mind, what is not intoxicating your mind is instead this totally other identity that you are dearly loved sons and daughters of a heavenly Father. And you have been brought into this new family that has this glorious new hope. And it's all been done not because of what you have accomplished, but because you have been ransomed by the precious blood of Christ in this wild and unimaginable act of self-giving, sacrificial love. So maybe to close it, I could ask the question, how are you doing guarding your minds? How are you doing pursuing a mindset that is sober-minded so that you can reflect on the holiness of who God is, the character of Christ that's revealed in his word, so that you can actually sit in quiet and prayer and worship and reflection. How are you doing guarding your mind? Or maybe another way to ask the question, if somebody were to look at your life, maybe just one day, and go over and just like the full registry of whatever has been fed into your mind, everything from your social media to your news outlets to the voices that you hear or whatever. If somebody could read and see everything that was pumped into your mind, what would they say your hope is set on? Where was I? We're going to save that one. I was going to read for you the next verse of the passage to keep it going. But I think we're going to come back to 1 Peter. I like where 1 Peter goes, and maybe after the month of missions, we'll come back and we'll spend just a little bit more time in Peter on the back end of the Pentecost season. But again, what I would just simply say for Peter this morning, just remember the big picture, that if you have hitched your life to Jesus and you have entered into this newness of life with this glorious hope, it should look different. And hopefully what you're seeing from Peter is this should just be common sense. Like for Peter, this is not duty, this is not task, this is not hardship, this is gospel. Like for Peter, gospel is not just what has happened in the past in your being ransomed, or it's not just what's coming in the future. Like for Peter, it's all of this, the life that you are privileged to live now. Right, is a holy reflection of God's character, full of meaning, set free from being ruled by former passions or empty and futile ways, a life that is now bathed in hope and confidence in what God is going to do. For Peter, this is good news. It's a wonderful invitation. And so for him, set your mind on all that is yet to come. Be sober-minded. Prepare your minds for action so you conduct yourself within that life, with fear and awe and reverence, and be holy as he is holy, so that his kingdom may advance, and that more and more people may find the joy and the glory and the freedom of who God is and the life that he gives for his honor and glory, in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.